the world's two largest economies, the United States and China, are now more interconnected than ever. But as China continues its descent onto the global stage, relations between these two proud nations have seen its ups and downs. That's why a mechanism to promote cross-cultural understanding and dialogue is urgently needed. Join me this week as I sit down with Stephen Schwartzman, co-founder, chairman, and CEO of the Blackstone Group, to talk about the defining bilateral relationship of our times, only on Biz Talk. The Obama administration has been in a distressing state since taking office. Partisanship in Washington is preventing U.S. lawmakers from pushing through major policy items, frustrating the president's agenda. From the president's jobs bill to reforming gun control laws, from immigration reform to measures addressing climate change, all have been ground to a near halt by an uncompromising Congress. The gridlock came to a peak in October of 2013 when Democrats and Republicans failed to reach a temporary solution for government spending. The result? An over 2-week shutdown of the government, the third longest in U.S. history, and 800,000 federal employees furloughed. In addition, over 1 million employees faced uncertainty as they were forced to work without knowing when their next paycheck will arrive. According to the White House, the immediate cost of the shutdown led to 120,000 jobs lost for October. Meanwhile, private surveys estimated the 16-day shutdown knocked anywhere between 0.2% to 0.6% off of fourth quarter U.S. GDP growth, costing the U.S. economy $12 to $24 billion. Although the tense days of October 2013 have since passed, the concern of an economic fallout from political bickering in the United States is still very much present. Experts warned that the partisan gridlock that led to the shutdown last year could become an increasingly common occurrence as the political division in the U.S. widens. Mr. Schwartzman, thank you for joining us today.
Glad to be here.
When you look at Washington, D.C. right now, it seems like there's so much political bickering going on in Congress. There's sort of like a political gridlock. You have the House Majority Leader wanting to sue the President of the United States. Do you think political gridlock is right now one of the biggest risks to the U.S. economy right now and just overall progress for the United States?
Our system is locked up for a variety of reasons, and everybody's got their own view on it. We have an administration that is farther to the left than we've had. Probably in my lifetime, and that gets some reaction typically from the right. It's the same in France and other places. And the Congress, as a result of those divisions, has basically just, in our system, we have a check and balance system. And so what happened, ironically, is that the Congress is the check, and it's just sort of checked out. And it's not good for the United States, and nobody thinks it is, and that will change, because in our system of government we have elections every 2 years for our lower house, and every 6 years for the upper house, staggered, and we have presidential elections every 4 years, with the president limited to 2 terms. So in approximately 2 years and a few months, we'll have an election for another president, and we'll start anew, the way we always do.
Okay. Does it make it easier, though, for the U.S. maybe to blame other countries with the lack of progress at home? Is it easier to find perhaps a scapegoat in Europe or in Asia because of the gridlock in D.C.?
Yeah, actually, with the move to populism globally in the developed world, there's scapegoatism all over the developed world. China is a potential target. That's one reason why I'm starting the Schwartzman Scholars, because if you don't deserve to be scapegoated, you shouldn't be. And so at the moment, China's more or less escaped that position, and there's populism within most of the developed world countries now, where they're unhappy with somebody, and what I worry about is eventually they'll become unhappy with China, just because it's a symbol now of a rising country and a symbol of success. So at the moment it's not an issue, but it's a potential issue.
How do you think the China-U.S. relationship is playing out? How do you view the current Sino-U.S. relationship?
Well, the current Chinese-U.S. relationship is actually pretty good. President Xi and President Obama actually get along very well. They'll both tell you that. There have been friction, of course, over cyber issues and other types of issues, and some of that's unavoidable. But I think that neither the U.S. nor China really wants to have any longer-term issues with each other. I mean, we're the two biggest geopolitical powers in the world. We've got to live together. Everybody knows it, and there'll be bumps in the road, but nobody wants to have it be more than a bump, and that's pretty clear.
Okay. Do you get a sense in the United States that Chinese investment is a little bit unwelcome these days in terms of Chinese companies actually investing into the U.S., in terms of acquiring U.S. companies? Because in the past few years, we've seen a few high-profile business deals being shot down by the U.S. government. And it could be different, the sentiment on Main Street versus corporate America. What do you think?
Well, over 99% of foreign investment in the United States is approved. So there's a huge amount of transactions that are approved. I think it's actually higher than 99. It's 99 point something. Every once in a while, a transaction occurs that triggers either a national security interest or some reason from a governmental point of view. But people in the States who are involved with approving acquisitions are very careful to make sure that we keep the door open. All we really care about in the States from regulatory approvals are really sensitive issues, militarily, technologically, things that could really jeopardize the safety of the United States. But basically, it's a quite open system.
Okay. So it is possible then, in your view, for China and the United States both to simultaneously take a leadership role to promote world peace, sustain economic growth, promote growth, or is that not possible because of just politics in each country?
I think it's all about self-interest. And that from a U.S. perspective, being a friend of China and operating in concert, whether it's on a whole variety of issues, from the environment to sort of national security issues. So, for example, China is not in the adventurism business. They're smart, and they need to develop their own economy, take care of their own people, and that's the primary goal, I believe, of China. And the U.S. in that sense is not much different.
The United States and China pledges to enhance economic and security cooperation. U.S. Secretary of State John
being able to explore what areas are really sensitive between the two countries. And there was all kinds of progress made just in those areas, which are not high conflict areas. Those are areas of great support and familiarity. In areas where there's inherent friction, whether it's cyber or other areas, that's going to remain somewhat raw for a while, and usually what happens is that people find some accommodation. So this dialogue system forces interaction, which itself is good.
Let's talk about the bilateral investment treaty specifically, because that always seems to be on the agenda every year for the S&ED. Talk to us about the importance of cementing this deal for both countries.
Well, there's always complexity in countries with different systems. And I think, since China's joined the WTO, it's been great for China. It's been good for the world. There are areas of, intellectual property which are, constant irritants in the West. And there are other areas that really need to be resolved. This is a question of systems getting in line. and development of legal systems and other types of issues. And it's, as they say, it's a journey. It's not a moment.
If we have this investment deal in place, do you think it's ever possible for China and the U.S. to actually get a free trade agreement set up?
That's a great question. A free trade agreement would really require a lot of major changes, certainly in intellectual property and enforcement and some other types of areas. And you know, I think people would be ultimately open for that, but it would have to be perceived that there was really a level playing field. I think the perception is on the U.S. side that it's pretty level coming in, but is not as level with the amount of protections and complexity in the Chinese system. So I think it's going to take quite a while.
Okay. And from the Chinese perspective, from China's side, the RMB always seems to be a scapegoat. Why is it so different if we compare the way the United Kingdom treats the RMB versus how the U.S. treats the RMB? The U.S. always seems to treat the RMB in sort of a policy contention sort of way, whereas London wants the RMB to come in. It wants to be an offshore RMB hub. Why do you think that is?
The RMB is a symbol of some level perceived unfairness in the pricing of the currency. As the government will prevail over the skeptics, given the resources of the government here, and also the fact that they move very quickly and decisively on these types of issues.
Politics can only be counted as one dimension to the U.S.-China relationship. In March of 2014, U.S. First Lady Michelle Obama paid her first visit to China on a personal note. A trip that is designed to promote mutual exchanges in education and people-to-people contacts. Together with her two daughters, Malia and Sasha, Mrs. Obama visited schools, historical sites, and natural heritages in China. In her speech to Chinese and American students at Peking University, she stressed the importance of receiving education, especially studying abroad in an era of globalization. Mrs. Obama wishes and encourages more U.S. students to take up their studies in China.
We view study abroad programs not just as an educational opportunity for students, but also as a vital part of America's foreign policy.
Promoting people-to-people relations and education has become common sense for both Chinese and U.S. leaders. That also turns into an urgent need for the West to learn more about China. In 2013, Blackstone co-founder, chairman, and CEO Stephen Schwarzman announced a $100 million personal gift in a $200 million fundraising campaign to build and endow the Schwarzman Scholars. This is China's largest philanthropic gift in its history. And funding commitment has already surpassed the original amount by $50 million. The Schwarzman Scholars Program aims to rival the Rhodes at Oxford and brings together the world's top minds to study at one of China's most elite universities, Tsinghua University.
This will be the first time that you're going to have these exceptionally high level of students in a significant amount coming to China. And the reason they're going to come to China is because they want to learn about China, because China is going to most probably end up as the largest economy in the world in around 20 years if it keeps growing 2 to 3 times what the developed world is doing.
The program will attract 200 students worldwide annually to study for a 1-year master's degree at Schwarzman College. Stephen Schwarzman hopes these will be the future leaders that will advance and bridge ties between the East and the West. The Schwarzman Scholars will welcome its inaugural class in 2016. The Schwarzman Scholars Program, you aim to bring the best and brightest to study here in China, and hopefully these future leaders can be a bridge between East and West, not just between China and the U.S. Ultimately, what is your vision for this program in terms of bridging this gap?
China is pretty unknown in the West. Everybody has some vision, but people don't have much content. There are 8 times the number of students from China that go just to the United States compared to the number that come from the United States to China. So the opportunity for misunderstandings are great. The objective of the Schwarzman Scholars Program with these terrific individuals who will be future leaders in their field is to get to know China and bring those lessons back to their host countries.
That's fantastic. It's a great vision. Would you say then cultural issues, people-to-people exchanges, education, which of course the Schwarzman Scholars Program, it embodies all three. Would you say these sort of softer factors are more important in bridging ties between East and West than, say, business and economic ties?
Well, I think it's mixed. Business ties are important. Economic ties are important. And personal relationships are really important as well. Not everyone has to be active day to day between China and the U.S. if they understand it to interpret what's going on. So I don't think it's an either-or answer to your question.
Sounds good. And speaking of leadership, Mr. Schwarzman, Blackstone has tremendous business here in China. What would you say are some of the defining characteristics between Chinese business leadership and American business leadership in particular? Some of the key differences, and do you think that these differences can sort of mesh together and create some sort of harmony?
I think the systems are different. China is a mixed system. There's a lot of touching base that goes on in the Chinese system. By the way, that happens in France too. Whereas in the U.S., you're pretty much just a completely free individual to make decisions with your business. So there's a certain deliberateness in the Chinese system that we don't have in the States. So it's different.
Okay. One final question before we let you go, Mr. Schwarzman. One piece of advice for an incoming Schwarzman scholar when they enter the college and when they leave on graduation day, what is the one single piece of most important advice that you will give them?
Understand the other people who are there and take advantage of all the remarkable visitors you're going to meet and internalize what you've learned and keep it for a lifetime.
Okay. Sounds like great advice. Many thanks for your time, Mr. Schwarzman.
Thank you.